This guide looks at the handling principles and strategies that are useful for the PDA child. There is much here that applies to both school and home environments, and it is essential for parents and teachers to share this common knowledge in order to form an effective partnership. Even the child who is compliant in school is likely to be very different at home, and even small issues in the classroom or playground can sow enough anxiety for prolonged and explosive consequences for the child's family later. Whatever the level of difficulty at school, this is likely to be much worse at home and must be recognised as a symptom of the syndrome rather than as a result of poor parenting. Educational needs can be summarised under three headings: keeping a child on task for a substantial part of the day, ensuring retention, minimising disruption. Most of a PDA child's learning will be done in one-to-one situations. Children with PDA are usually drawn to adults and generally seem to be more comfortable with them than their peers. However, the child has to balance this affinity for adults against the real fear they have of the demands that they may place on them. The child's sociability can be capitalised on, and learning demands can be disguised or tempered by exploiting the pleasures of a good relationship. This is best achieved with a key worker who will be able to build up a repertoire of strategies tailored to the individual child's personality, finding different ways of getting through. The child develops trust and learns their key worker's personal boundaries, whilst the adult gains understanding of the child's limits and knowledge of when to relax pressure or to continue to pursue the current objective. Key workers need to be reassured that even if they feel that they are in a precarious relationship, it is likely that the child will have formed a strong bond to them. A relationship that works will not eliminate problems, but will cause a child to resist demands less relentlessly. However, relationships that don't work can result in disaster. In all cases, it is helpful if a child can develop positive relationships with other staff. Otherwise, a child can become so obsessively attached and dependent on one person that illness or staff changes can cause real problems. Ensuring retention. Much of the day will be spent monitoring what has actually been learned. For some, any learning is regarded as an unwanted demand, and at best is met with reluctant compliance. Far more mental and physical energy can be exerted avoiding a task than would be used if they complied with it in the first place. When learning is such a continued battle, it is no surprise that little that is taught is retained. However, some children appear to become more tolerant of demands and may seem to be coping in the learning environment, but despite appearances, these children may be adopting the role of compliant child, learning that keeping up an act of an attentive learner actually reduces attention and the associated demands. Instead of learning, these pupils may have actually switched off from processing and absorbing what they appear to be attending to. The illusion of learning may go as far as short-term recall when checked in a lesson, or even a day or two later, but it is then found that there is a failure to retain much beyond this. It can therefore be seen that both for unwilling and compliant types, much repetition and overlearning is required. This is time-consuming, and the need for constant checking and retracing of steps means that the child can easily fall behind even when placed in small remedial groups. The child who learns that by acting compliant they can minimize the demands placed on them must have this strategy recognized. Children can acquire skills but fail to exploit or continue to use them. For example, a child may show the ability to read with meaning and understanding, but then regress to reading only and end up just page turning to maintain an impression of compliance. Progress is fragile in PDA, and learning gains must be consolidated and built on, or risk being lost. In all cases, care must be taken lest desirable compliance and conforming comes at the expense of a pupil putting their minds into neutral when they're entering the classroom. Minimising disruption. Not all PDA children are actively disruptive, especially as they learn that keeping a low profile reduces pressure. However, the possibility is always there due to their impulsiveness and changeable moods. Although many PDA children learn compliance and tolerance at school, they commonly behave much worse at home, as though they can only maintain the exertion of compliance for a few hours. It is important to realise that this is to do with a child reaching their limits, rather than due to ineffective management at home. All children need to let their hair down, but this release of bottled tension is so common in PDA that parents need reassurance that this is not their fault. Indeed, it is unlikely that equal compliance will ever be shown in all settings and environments. If not understood, This can be a cause for great tension between parents and teachers. Compliance alone cannot be used as a gauge for the success of school strategies, and failing approaches may only ever show consequences in the security of the home. It has been found that 15 minutes of teacher or key worker counselling support at both the start and the end of the day can make a real difference. This time can be used to listen to any worries, or may be used as an informal chill-out time. Relaxing tensions is a good start to the day. Some children are calmed by foot or hand massages on arrival, and it has been found that this can be used as a preventative measure against outbursts occurring later in the day. When resisting social demands, it's very common for the PDA child to lash out, scream, or shout aggressively. When a child is behaving in such a robust way, it can be difficult to understand that this behaviour is a result of extreme vulnerability and anxiety rather than naughtiness, and it must be seen as a panic attack rather than aggression. With this recognised, it can be seen that reassurance and calming is needed rather than blame or scolding. Sometimes the child may discover that they can cause maximum disruption and have demands withdrawn by pulling their pants down, urinating, or other sexualised or shocking behaviour. This strategy must not work as a distraction from whatever the child is trying to avoid. Staff need to remain calm and matter of fact, and paying the least possible attention to this behaviour, and carry on with the task in hand with a minimum of fuss. Indeed, this attitude of keep calm and carry on is applicable to many types of extreme behaviour. Other children in class are likely to need active help in tolerating disruption, and clearly must be kept safe from risks of being caught up in the midst of any destructive or aggressive behaviour. Protection, too, is needed for the PDA child, who can be the focus of bullying and teasing for their peers. Also, since they are so naive, they can easily be targets for being set up, otherwise exploited, or wound up to provide support for all. This is not only destructive for the child, but also for the other pupils who participate in this. The circle of friends technique has been found to be a particularly helpful tool to combat this in mainstream schools, and has the added advantage that it can be used as part of the personal and social education curriculum for the peer group. This technique informs a group of children about a child's difficulties, and so creates a protective and understanding circle of friends. This can be particularly effective if the same group will be moving on with a child as they progress to secondary school. Support needs. It can be seen that PDA children need a substantial amount of input. An hour of one-to-one academic work per day is needed in order for a child to make progress. Add this to the support needed for group situations, and provision will amount to half-time support from a classroom assistant as a minimum. When there is considerable disruption, and particularly if the child hits out in panic, it may be found that full-time support is required. Also, for many children, support must be extended to the playground, which can be one of their most challenging environments. Experience suggests that the personality of a school is more important than its category. Mainstream schools are desirable if possible, as PDA children are socially imitative and normative role models are important. However, for many, a specialist school is the most appropriate option, especially if mainstream leads to isolation rather than integration. Hospitable qualities to look for in a school include tolerance, imagination, flexibility, determination to succeed, positive interest in unusual special needs, and commitment to integration. A strongly supportive head is important, if not essential, as is a whole school consistency of approach when dealing with the child's behaviour. Inevitably, a mainstream school will require additional funding, and even in an ordinary special school, much enhanced staffing will still be required. Specialist schools with an approach based on traditional behavioural methods are definitely not recommended for a child with PDA. A more personal and relationship-based approach is repeatedly found to be more effective.